I married her for the money." The words were out before I could stop them. 7 men in suits stared at me like I had just confessed to a crime. Marissa's hand tightened around mine under the table, not in support, in warning. Caleb smiled. He thought he'd won. "Yes," I continued, because if I stopped now, I'd look guilty instead of honest. "She needed a husband to keep her company. I needed work to keep my house. So we made a deal." Silence, heavy, judgmental. Marissa's voice was barely a whisper. "Ethan." "But that's not the whole story," I said, turning to her instead of the board. "What started as a transaction stopped feeling like one. Somewhere between pancakes and court dates, I stopped pretending." Caleb leaned forward. "So you admit it was fraud?" I looked him in the eye. "No, I admit it was desperate." Then I said the part that changed everything. I didn't fall in love with her because she saved my business. I fell in love with her because she stayed when she didn't have to. The chairman cleared his throat. "Mr. Cole, are you telling this board your marriage is real?" I glanced at Marissa. Her eyes were wet. And for the first time since this whole mess began, I wasn't afraid of the truth. "Yes," I said, but the real question wasn't whether the board believed me. It was whether she did. 2 weeks earlier. The knock came at 9:47 p.m. I remember the time because I was counting seconds between bills and sleep. Sophie had just drifted off upstairs. 3 kisses on her forehead like always. That was our rule. 3 meant everything was safe. When I opened the door, safety left with the rain. Marissa Vaughn stood there soaked through, hair plastered to her face, holding a leather duffel bag like it weighed more than it should. "Mr. Cole," she said, calm voice, shaking hands. "I need a husband by tomorrow." I blinked. "I'm sorry." "I have 8 hours," she continued. "If I'm not legally married by midnight tomorrow, I lose control of my company." That was the first time I understood what desperation looks like when it wears expensive clothes. "You should call someone else," I told her. "I can't," she said. "Everyone else wants something from me. And I don't." She met my eyes. "You want to keep your house." That landed. 3 months behind on the mortgage. Workshop bleeding money. One more missed payment and Sophie would be packing her stuffed elephant into a box. "How do you know that?" I asked. "I did my homework." I should have been offended. Instead, I was impressed. "You're offering what exactly?" 6 months of renovation contracts, market rate, written agreements, clean divorce after. She didn't say love. She didn't say pretend romance. She said contracts. "Why me?" "Because you don't belong to my world," she answered. "And you don't want my world." She was wrong about one thing. I didn't want her world. I wanted stability for my daughter. I stepped aside. "Come in." We built a fake relationship at my kitchen table that night. Timeline, first date, private romance, quiet engagement. She wrote details down like she was preparing for trial. "What do I drink?" she asked. "Coffee, 2 sugars, no cream." She froze. "How did you?" "You stir it 3 times before sipping," I said. "You did that when you hired me for that warehouse job." She studied me differently after that. Not like a contractor, like a variable she hadn't calculated. Around midnight, she fell asleep on my couch, fully dressed, phone still in her hand. I stood in the doorway longer than I should have, because this wasn't just a business arrangement anymore. This was a storm walking into my daughter's life, and I was about to let it. Morning came with pancakes. Sophie came down the stairs and stopped dead in the hallway. "Daddy," she said slowly. "Who's that?" Marissa turned like she'd been caught stealing something fragile. "I'm Marissa," she said softly. "I work with your dad." Sophie looked at her like kids do when they're deciding whether someone is safe. "You have nice hair," Sophie said finally. Marissa blinked. "Thank you." "It's wet." "It was raining." "You'll get sick." And for the first time, Marissa smiled without effort. "I'll remember an umbrella next time." Next time, the word hit me, because if this worked, there would be a next time. If it failed, there would be consequences. By noon, we had a marriage license. By 9 that night, we had rings. I gave her my mother's old band, the only gold I owned. "It's temporary," I told her. She slid it on anyway, and something about the way it fit didn't feel temporary at all. The board meeting happened 3 days later. Caleb thought he'd expose us. Instead, he exposed something else, that this wasn't fake anymore, but the moment that made it real. It wasn't the confession, it wasn't the ring, it was Sophie. The morning the news broke calling our marriage a loophole, Sophie walked into the kitchen holding a tablet. "Daddy," she asked quietly, "are you lying to her too?" That question nearly broke me, because I could lie to a board, I could lie to the press, but I couldn't lie to my daughter, and I realized something in that moment. If this was going to survive, it couldn't stay an arrangement. It had to become a choice. Back in that boardroom, after my confession, after Caleb tried to frame it as fraud, the chairman finally spoke. "The trust requires marriage," he said, "not perfection." 6 hands went up, Caleb's did. Marissa's company was safe, but when we walked out of that building, she didn't celebrate. She pulled me aside in the parking lot. "You didn't have to say all that." "Yes, I did. You could have destroyed everything." "I know." She looked at me differently then, not like a contractor, not like a deal, like a man who just risked everything for her. "Why?" she asked. I didn't hesitate, "Because I don't want this to end." Her breath caught, and that was the moment the lie officially died. But loving someone who used to see marriage as leverage, that's not simple. And loving someone when the whole world thinks you're a fraud, that's not safe. The real fight was Caleb. It wasn't the board. It wasn't the press. It was the question neither of us wanted to say out loud. If we hadn't been desperate, would we have ever chosen each other? The first time she kissed me, it wasn't romantic. It was desperate. We were standing in the kitchen at midnight, news vans parked outside the gates, headlines calling our marriage a loophole with good lighting. Her hands were shaking. "My father built that company from nothing," she said, "and now they're calling it a circus." I should have said something steady, something reassuring. Instead I said, "Let them talk." She looked at me like I didn't understand. "I've spent 10 years proving I deserve that company," she said. "If they think I manipulated you." "You didn't." "They don't know that." I stepped closer. "I do." She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days, and then she kissed me, not soft, not careful, like she was trying to anchor herself to something real. I kissed her back, not because it was part of the deal, because it wasn't anymore. When we pulled apart, she whispered, "That was a mistake." I shook my head. "No, that was overdue." The next morning, Sophie punched a girl at school. I didn't believe it when the principal called. "Sophie doesn't hit," I said. "She does when someone calls her father a liar," the principal replied. By the time we got to the school, Sophie's eyes were red but defiant. "She said you only married Marissa for money," Sophie blurted the second she saw me. "And that Marissa doesn't really love us." Marissa knelt down slowly. "Sophie," she said gently, "you don't fight people to defend us." "But they were being mean." "I know. And I'm proud you wanted to protect us, but we don't prove love with fists." Sophie looked between us. "Are you real?" she asked. That question didn't belong in a 7-year-old's mouth. Marissa swallowed. "Yes," she said, "we are." Sophie studied her like she was deciding whether to trust that answer. Then she nodded once. "Okay." Kids do that. They believe you when you sound certain, even when you're still figuring it out yourself. That night after Sophie fell asleep, Marissa stood in the hallway outside her room. "She defended us," she whispered. "She defended me," I corrected softly. Marissa looked like someone had handed her something fragile and priceless. "No one has ever defended me like that before," she said. That told me more about her past than any boardroom battle ever could. "You don't have to fight alone anymore," I said. She turned to me slowly. "That's the problem." "What is?" "I don't know how not to." Caleb escalated. Subpoenas, financial audits, private investigators showing up at my workshop asking if I'd secured my retirement through marriage. I answered every question calmly, because here's the truth. If I wanted her money, I would have asked for more. What I wanted was stability, and somewhere along the way, I started wanting her. One night after another article hit the news questioning her integrity, Marissa finally cracked. Not angry, not sharp, just tired. She sat on the edge of the bed and said quietly, "Maybe we should end it." The words hit harder than I expected. "You don't mean that?" "I do. This started as strategy. Now Sophie's getting dragged into it. You're being investigated. My name is trending for all the wrong reasons. So we run." She looked at me. "You could go back to your house, keep the contracts, file for divorce quietly, say it didn't work out." "And what do you tell Sophie?" Marissa didn't answer, because that was the crack in the logic. Sophie wasn't playing pretend anymore. She was building attachment. "You think she won't notice if you disappear?" I asked gently. Marissa's jaw tightened. "I never planned to matter to her." "Well, you do." Silence. Then she said the sentence that changed everything again. "I never planned for you to matter either." That wasn't fear, that was confession. The board called another emergency meeting. Public pressure was mounting. Caleb was feeding the press just enough to keep suspicion alive. Before we left for that meeting, Sophie stood in the doorway holding Mr. Elephant. "Are you going to fight again?" she asked. "Probably," I said honestly. "Are you going to win?" Marissa knelt in front of her. "We already did." Sophie frowned. "Then why are they still being mean?" Marissa hesitated. "Because some people don't know how to lose." Sophie thought about that. Then she walked over to me, took off the cheap plastic ring she wore from a birthday party months ago and pressed it into my hand. "For luck," she said. I don't know why that hit me so hard. Maybe because it wasn't gold, it wasn't expensive, but it meant something. I slid it into my pocket and walked into that boardroom ready to burn everything down if I had to. Caleb thought he had us cornered. He presented timelines, financial statements, photos from the gala where we looked too rehearsed. He wanted cracks. He didn't realize cracks are how light gets in. When I stood up and told them the truth, not the polished version, not the romantic one, but the messy, desperate human version, the room shifted, because everyone in that room had married for some reason beyond love, security, expectation, convenience. We were just the only ones honest enough to say it. After the vote went in our favor, Caleb leaned toward me and whispered, "You think this ends here?" I met his eyes. "No, I think this is where it begins." In the parking lot, Marissa stopped walking. "Why didn't you tell me you were going to say all that?" she asked. "Because you would have stopped me. You risked everything." "So did you." Her eyes searched my face. "You're not afraid?" "I am." "Of what?" "That this works." She blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means if this works, if we're real, then I don't get to hide behind contracts either." Marissa stared at me like she just realized the ground had shifted beneath her. "You don't have to love me because it makes sense," I said quietly. "I know. You don't have to love me because I saved your company. I know. You just have to decide whether you want me there when the crisis ends." That was the real test, because crisis creates closeness. Ordinary life tests it, and that was coming, fast. When we got home, Sophie ran into the foyer. "Did you win?" she demanded. Marissa smiled for real this time. "Yes." Sophie looked relieved. Then she looked at both of us and asked something simple. "So we're staying like this?" Marissa glanced at me, and for the first time there was no boardroom, no press, no Caleb, just a 7-year-old asking if her family was temporary. Marissa stepped forward. "Yes," she said, "we're staying." But as I watched her say it, I knew something. Saying it to Sophie was easy. Saying it to herself, that was the real battle, and we were about to find out which one of us was braver. The first night she said, "I love you," she didn't mean to. It slipped out between exhaustion and fear. We were standing in the kitchen after midnight again. That seemed to be our pattern. Crisis came at night. Caleb had filed an appeal, not because he thought he would win, because he wanted to bleed her. Lawyers, depositions, press leaks, anonymous sources questioning my motives. Marissa stood at the counter staring at legal documents like they might rearrange themselves into mercy. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "Then stop fighting," I said. She laughed once. Sharp. "You don't understand. If I stop, I lose." "Lose what?" "Everything." I stepped closer. "You think the company is everything." "It is." "No," I said gently, "it was." That made her look at me, really look at me. "You have Sophie asking you to help with homework. You have pancakes on Sunday mornings. You have a man who would stand in front of a boardroom and take the heat so you don't have to." She swallowed. "That's not everything." Her voice cracked. "I don't know how to choose that." "Then I'll choose it for us," I said quietly. She blinked, and that's when it happened. "I love you," she breathed, not loud, not dramatic, just honest. The air went still. Her eyes widened like she wanted to pull the words back. I didn't let her. "I love you too," I said, no hesitation, because somewhere between Sophie's school fight and the boardroom confession it stopped being complicated. It just became true. The appeal dragged on for weeks. Caleb wasn't trying to win in court anymore. He was trying to wear her down. Every headline reopened wounds. Every interview twisted our story. Marriage of convenience. Financial desperation. Calculated alliance. They weren't wrong, that's the frustrating part. They just weren't complete. One afternoon, Sophie came home unusually quiet. I found her in her room drawing. "What's that?" I asked. She turned the paper around. It was the three of us holding hands, big house in the background, but there was something new. She'd drawn a line around us, a circle. "What's the circle?" I asked softly. "So mean people can't get in," she said. That did it. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about contracts anymore. This was about protecting that circle. And Marissa saw it too. She stood in the doorway watching us, eyes soft. "That's what family looks like," Sophie added matter-of-factly. Marissa stepped forward. "And what does family do?" Sophie didn't hesitate. "They stay." That night, Marissa made the hardest call of her life. She offered Caleb 15%, no voting rights, no control, just profit, in exchange for ending the war. "You're giving him a piece of your father's company," I said quietly after she hung up. "I'm giving him a piece so he stops trying to take all of it," she replied. "You sure?" She looked at Sophie through the glass doors, asleep on the couch with a book on her chest. "I'm choosing my life," she said, "not just my legacy." That was growth. That was courage, not winning, walking away. Caleb accepted just like that, because power without respect feels empty, and he'd already lost the room. The press moved on to the next scandal. The board relaxed. The lawyers stopped calling every hour, and suddenly, there was quiet. That's when the real test started, because chaos had been our glue. Now we had normal. Normal is harder. Normal meant arguing about groceries. Normal meant Marissa trying to cook and almost setting off the smoke alarm. Normal meant me feeling out of place in a house bigger than my entire past. One night we fought over something stupid, a couch. I wanted something practical. She wanted something modern. "It's just furniture," I said. "It's our home," she snapped. We stood there breathing hard, then she froze. "Our home," she repeated, "not the house, not the mansion, ours." The fight dissolved. We both heard it. The shift. Sophie adapted faster than either of us. She stopped asking if this was temporary. Stopped testing whether Marissa would be there at breakfast. She just assumed it. That trust scared me, because I knew if this broke, it wouldn't just hurt us, it would hurt her. One night after we tucked Sophie in, Marissa sat on the edge of the bed and whispered, "What if we're only strong because we survived a storm?" "Then we build a roof," I said. She laughed softly. "You make everything sound simple." "It's not simple, it's a decision." She looked at me carefully. "Are you choosing me?" "Yes." "Even without the contracts?" "Yes." "Even if I step back from the company and I'm not this version of me?" "I didn't fall in love with the CEO," I said. "I fell in love with the woman who can't play go fish without showing her cards." That broke her, in the best way. She leaned forward and kissed me slow. Not desperate, not frantic, certain. 3 months after Caleb signed the settlement, Marissa did something no one expected. She hired a COO, delegated authority, left work at 5. The board thought she was losing ambition. She was gaining perspective. Saturday mornings became pancakes and cartoons. Sunday afternoons became renovation sketches on the patio. Evenings became movie nights where Sophie insisted we all sit under one blanket like we were in a tiny apartment instead of a mansion. And somewhere in all that ordinary life, I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. One afternoon, I came home from the workshop and found flour covering the kitchen. Marissa and Sophie stood in the middle of it, hair messy, faces powdered white. "We're baking," Sophie announced proudly. "It exploded," Marissa admitted. I pulled out my phone. "Don't you dare," Marissa warned. I snapped the picture anyway because that was happiness. Later that night she found the photo. "You're keeping this?" she asked. "Of course. We look ridiculous. We look like a family." She stared at the image for a long time. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered. "Neither did I. But here we are." Yeah, here we were. No deadlines, no contracts, no boardroom ultimatums, just 3 people in a kitchen that finally felt lived in. But peace doesn't erase fear completely. And that night, as we lay in bed, Marissa said something that made my chest tighten. "What if we only work because it started in chaos?" I turned toward her in the dark. "Then we prove it works in calm. And if it does, then at least we'll know we chose it honestly." She reached for my hand, held it tight. "Promise me something." "What?" "If this ever stops being real, you'll tell me. Not hide it, not pretend." I squeezed her fingers. "I promise." She exhaled slowly, "Because the truth is, we had built something real out of something strategic, but real love, it has to survive boredom, it has to survive silence. And tomorrow was going to test that in a way neither of us expected. Because sometimes the hardest threat isn't an enemy, it's doubt. And doubt had just started whispering. The doubt didn't come from Caleb, it came from me. Not in a loud way, not in a dramatic way. It crept in quietly one Tuesday morning while I was standing in the workshop staring at a blueprint I'd drawn 3 times already. Everything was stable. Mortgage paid, contracts steady, no reporters outside the gates. No emergency board meetings, just normal, and normal felt unfamiliar. For months, survival had given me purpose. Protect Marissa, protect Sophie, fight Caleb, beat the clock. Now there was no clock, and without crisis I had time to think. That's dangerous. Because when a man who built something in chaos finally gets quiet, he starts asking one question. If she hadn't needed me that night, would she have ever chosen me? I didn't say anything at first. I just started pulling back in small ways, stayed later at the workshop, took on extra side jobs I didn't need. Let Marissa handle school pickups alone even when I was free. She noticed, of course she noticed. She built a company from micro details. You think she wouldn't notice her husband drifting? One night she found me on the back patio staring at nothing. "Are we okay?" she asked. That question hit harder than it should have. "Yeah," I said automatically. She didn't move. "Don't do that," she said softly. "Do what?" "Pretend everything's fine when it is." I exhaled. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing. You're not here the way you were." There it was, the truth pressing against my ribs. "You didn't choose me," I said finally. The words hung between us. Marissa's face went still. "What?" "You chose survival. You chose the company. I just happened to be the available solution." Silence, not angry, wounded. "I married you," she said slowly. "You married a deadline." She stepped back like I'd slapped her. "That's what you think. I think if your father's trust didn't exist, if Caleb hadn't forced your hand, you wouldn't have knocked on my door." Her eyes filled, but this time not with fear, with hurt. "You really believe that?" "I don't know what to believe," I admitted. "That's the problem." She didn't yell, didn't storm off. She just nodded once. Then she walked inside, and for the first time since this whole thing started. We slept back to back. The next morning Sophie felt it immediately. Kids always do. "Did you fight?" She asked over cereal. No, Marissa said too quickly. Yes, I said at the same time. Sophie looked between us. You're bad at lying, she informed us. We almost smiled. Almost. After I dropped Sophie at school, I came home early. Marissa was in the kitchen but not working, not on calls, just sitting. You're pulling away because you think I settled, she said without looking up. I'm pulling away because I don't want to be your emergency plan. You're not. I was. She stood slowly. Yes, she said, you were. That caught me off guard. She walked closer. I didn't knock on your door because I was in love with you. I know. I knocked because I was desperate. I know. But I stayed because I fell in love with you. There it was, clean, clear, no corporate polish. I don't stay for things that don't matter, she continued. You think I fought the board, the press, my own brother for convenience. I didn't answer. You think I gave up control of my company because you were temporary. Her voice shook now. Ethan, I built walls around myself for 10 years. You didn't slip through because I needed a husband. You broke through because you were kind when I was manipulative, honest when I was strategic, gentle with Sophie when I was terrified. She stepped closer. You think I don't know I would have never chosen someone like you back then. That stung, but that's exactly the point, she whispered. I would have chosen someone safe, polished, predictable. She shook her head, and I would have been miserable. The room felt smaller. You weren't my backup plan, she said. You were the best decision I ever made. I didn't deserve that grace. I'm scared, I admitted quietly. Of what? That one day you'll wake up and realize you could have had someone more impressive. She laughed softly through tears. Ethan, I had impressive. That shut me up. I don't want impressive, she said. I want steady. I want someone who shows up. I want the man who makes pancakes and fixes leaky faucets and tells the truth in boardrooms even when it burns. She took my hand. You're not my crisis. You're my choice. That word again, choice. It sounded different this time, heavier, intentional. That night Sophie crawled into our bed. She hadn't done that in months. Can I sleep here? She asked. Bad dream, I asked. No, she said. I just like when we're close. Marissa looked at me over Sophie's head, and something inside me settled, because love isn't about who knocks first, it's about who stays. The next Saturday, Marissa did something that stunned me. She canceled a high-profile investor dinner. You didn't have to do that, I told her. Yes, I did, she replied. Why? Because Sophie has a school play. That's small compared to. Nothing is small compared to this, she interrupted gently. You think I'm stepping back from the company because I'm tired. She shook her head. I'm stepping back because I want to be present. For us. For you. For her. That wasn't obligation. That was alignment. At the school play, Sophie stood on stage in a cardboard sun costume. She forgot her line. Froze. Started to panic. And from the front row, Marissa whispered loudly enough for Sophie to hear. You've got this. Sophie found her words, finished strong. When she ran off stage, she didn't run to me. She ran to Marissa. Did I do good? You were brilliant, Marissa said, lifting her. And in that moment, I saw something that erased every doubt I had. Marissa wasn't surviving anymore. She was living, and she was choosing this life over and over. That night after Sophie fell asleep, I pulled Marissa onto the back patio. I'm sorry, I said. For what? For doubting something you've been proving every day. She smiled softly. Doubt isn't betrayal. Feels like it. It's just fear trying to protect you. I cupped her face. You don't have to protect me from love. She leaned into my hand. I'm not protecting you. I'm protecting us. There's a difference. Weeks later, we hosted a small gathering. Nothing fancy, just friends, workshop guys, Mrs. Chen. A few board members who had become allies. No media, no spectacle, just people who knew the messy version of our story. At one point, someone asked how we met. Marissa looked at me. Should we tell the real version? She asked. I grinned. The desperate one or the romantic one? The honest one. So we told it. The 8-hour deadline, the contracts, the boardroom confession, the panic, the doubt, the choice. And when we finished, Mrs. Chen said something simple. Most people fall in love and then fight to protect it. She looked at us. You two fought first. Then she smiled. And that's why it's going to last. Later that night, Sophie curled between us on the couch. You know what I think? She said seriously. What? Marissa asked. I think you guys are lucky. Why? I asked. Because you got to choose each other twice. Marissa looked at me, and I realized something. She was right. The first time we chose each other out of necessity. The second time, we chose each other without pressure, without deadlines, without fear. That's the difference between survival and love, and that difference was everything. The second time I almost lost her, there was no Caleb involved. No board, no headlines, just silence. It started with a phone call. Marissa stepped into the hallway to take it. I didn't think anything of it at first. She learned to keep work from swallowing the house. But when she came back into the kitchen, her expression had changed. Not stressed, not angry, resolved. What happened? I asked. That was New York, she said. My chest tightened. New York. The board of Armitage Holdings. They want me to step in as interim CEO. 6-month restructuring contract. 6 months, my stomach dropped. That's huge, I managed. It is. And it's in Manhattan. There it was, the real problem. You'd have to move, I said quietly, temporarily. And Sophie? She could transfer for a semester. It's one of the best private schools in the country. And my workshop. We could expand, open a branch there. I could help fund it. I stared at her, and suddenly I wasn't hearing opportunity. I was hearing distance. You said you wanted ordinary, I said. I do. Then why are we talking about leaving it? She ran a hand through her hair. Because this is the kind of opportunity people spend their lives chasing. I thought you stopped chasing. I did, but that doesn't mean ambition disappears. The air shifted between us, not hostile, uncertain. That night Sophie was drawing at the dining table. Guess what? Marissa said carefully. We might get to live in New York for a little while. Sophie's eyes lit up, like in the movies. Maybe, Marissa smiled. Sophie looked at me. Will Daddy's workshop come too? That question hit like a weight. I don't know yet, I said. Sophie frowned slightly. I don't want to leave Mr. Chen's cat. Mrs. Chen, the school. The backyard, her circle. Children measure life in smaller anchors than adults do. Later that night, after Sophie was asleep, I asked the question that had been sitting heavy in my chest. If you go, are you going because you want it or because you're afraid of staying still? Marissa didn't answer immediately. I worked my entire life to be seen as capable, she said finally. If I turn this down, I'll wonder what I gave up. And if you take it, I'll wonder what it costs. There it was, the real choice, ambition or alignment, legacy or life, but I couldn't make it for her, and I wouldn't ask her to shrink for me. I won't hold you back, I said quietly. She looked at me sharply. I don't want you to. I know. But I won't beg you to stay either. Silence. That's what real love sounds like sometimes, not dramatic, just steady. The next week was tense, not fighting, just distance. She had meetings with New York investors over video calls. I stayed longer at the workshop. Sophie sensed it. Are you leaving? She asked Marissa one afternoon. Marissa knelt down. I don't know yet. Why? Because sometimes grown-ups have to choose between two good things. Sophie thought about that. Which one is better? Marissa hesitated. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Sophie looked at her seriously. Does one of them have us? That did it. I saw it in Marissa's face. The shift. That night she didn't come to bed right away. I found her in the kitchen, staring at the fridge, at Sophie's drawings, at the messy cookie photo I'd printed and stuck there. This wasn't supposed to happen, she said quietly. What wasn't? I wasn't supposed to want this more than the company. You don't have to choose one forever. But I have to choose one now. She turned toward me. You think I'm selfish for even considering it? No. I do. Her voice cracked. I spent 10 years building something powerful, and now the thing that feels powerful is being here, watching Sophie's plays, arguing about couches, burning cookies. That's not small, I said gently. It feels small compared to Manhattan. I stepped closer. Small is where life actually happens. She looked up at me. You wouldn't move, would you? The honest answer was hard. I'd go if you needed me to, I said, but I built something here. Sophie built something here. Stability matters. She nodded slowly. I know. The call came 3 days later. She stepped outside to take it. I didn't follow, I didn't listen, because this decision had to be hers. 10 minutes later, she walked back in, eyes red, shoulders steady. I turned it down, she said. I didn't speak. I didn't celebrate. I just waited. They offered everything, she continued. Money, equity, influence. And I asked them what the long-term plan was. And they said after 6 months, they'd likely want me permanently. That landed. I realized something, she said quietly. If I leave this house for 6 months, I'm not coming back the same. She stepped closer, and I don't want to miss this. This, I asked. She took my hand and placed it over her heart. Us. That night Sophie crawled into our bed again. Are we moving? She whispered. Marissa pulled her close. No. Forever. Forever is a big word, I said gently. But we're staying, Marissa finished. Sophie smiled into the pillow. Good. A week later, I found something in Marissa's desk drawer. A printed email from New York. Subject line, final offer. I handed it to her. You kept this. She nodded. Why? Because I want to remember what I chose. Regret. Perspective. She folded it carefully. I didn't turn it down because I was scared. Then why? Because I finally understood something. She met my eyes. Success without peace isn't success. I let that sit between us. She smiled softly. You were never my emergency plan. And Manhattan. She shrugged, just noise. That weekend we went nowhere, did nothing impressive, just stayed home, built a bookshelf in the garage, watched a movie under one blanket, ordered pizza. Sophie fell asleep between us. Marissa leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered. I used to think choosing love meant giving something up. And now, I think it means choosing what matters most. I kissed her temple. Some people chase the world. She smiled. I chose mine. And in that quiet, ordinary room, that felt bigger than Manhattan ever could. The morning she told me she was pregnant, she didn't say it gently. She held the test in her hand like evidence in court. 2 lines. No boardroom, no deadline, no deal, just us. I wasn't planning this, she said quietly. I laughed under my breath. When have we ever planned anything? Her eyes were wide, not scared, just aware. This changes everything. I stepped closer. No, I said softly, it proves everything. She let out a shaky breath. You're not panicking. I married you in 8 hours, I reminded her. This feels slow. That made her smile, but then her face shifted. What if I'm not good at this? At what? Being someone's mother, being steady, being the version of me that doesn't run toward work when things get hard. I cupped her face. You already are. She shook her head. I wasn't there from the beginning with Sophie. You were there when it mattered. She looked at me like she needed to hear it again. You didn't marry into this family, I said. You built it. Telling Sophie was different. We sat her down in the living room. Marissa squeezed my hand. We have something to tell you, I said. Sophie looked suspicious immediately. Are we moving again? No, Marissa laughed. Then what? You're going to be a big sister." Sophie blinked, processing. Then her face split into a grin so wide it almost broke me. "Forever?" she asked. "Yes," Marissa said, "like actually forever." "Yes." Sophie jumped up and wrapped her arms around Marissa first. "Not me, Marissa. I won't let mean people in the circle," Sophie declared seriously. And just like that, the circle grew. 9 months later, I stood in a hospital room holding Marissa's hand while she brought our son into the world. There were no reporters, no legal documents, no contracts, just sweat and fear and life. When I held him for the first time, tiny and loud and furious at existence, I looked at Marissa and realized something. She didn't look like the CEO who once showed up at my door with a duffel bag. She looked like someone who had finally arrived home. "You okay?" I asked her softly. She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I almost lost this." "Lost what?" "This version of me." She looked at Sophie standing proudly at the foot of the bed, holding a big sister balloon. "If I had chased Manhattan, if I had kept choosing work over this, I would have never known who I could be." I leaned down and kissed her forehead. "You didn't chase Manhattan." "No," she said, "I chose a contractor." I smiled. "You chose stability." She shook her head. "No, I chose you." Life didn't become perfect. It became fuller, louder, messier. There were sleepless nights and diaper explosions and arguments about whose turn it was to wake up at 3 a.m. There were school projects and board meetings and workshop deadlines and half-finished dinners. But there was never doubt again, because we had already tested the foundation, under pressure, under fire, under fear, and it held. A year after our son was born, we held another small gathering in the garden. Not a recommitment, not an anniversary, just a celebration of surviving. Sophie stood in the grass holding her little brother, bossy and proud. Mrs. Chen cried openly. My workshop crew teased me about softening up. And Marissa stood beside me, watching it all with a quiet expression I recognized now, contentment. Caleb was there too, still distant, still formal, but no longer an enemy. He approached us late in the evening. "You built something real," he said stiffly. Marissa nodded. "Yes." "I underestimated that." "You underestimated us," I corrected gently. He gave a small, reluctant smile. "Maybe." When he left, Marissa exhaled slowly. "I don't need him to approve anymore," she said. "You don't." "I don't need anyone to." And that was growth, not winning, not proving, just peace. Later that night, after the guests were gone and the kids were asleep, we sat on the back steps. The house behind us wasn't cold anymore. It was loud with history, sticky fingerprints on cabinets, toy trucks under couches, blueprints on kitchen tables. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That the first time you knocked on my door, I thought you were bringing chaos. And you were bringing choice." She smiled softly. "You could have said no." "So could you." She leaned against me. I didn't know what I was asking for that night. "You asked for a husband. I needed one for 8 hours. And now," she looked up at me, "I need you for the rest of my life." There it was, not dramatic, not desperate, just certain. Sometimes I think about that boardroom, about the moment I said I married her for the money. People still bring it up sometimes, laugh about it, call it bold, call it reckless, but they never understood the part that mattered. I didn't say that to defend us. I said it because lies can't build foundations. Only truth can, and truth isn't always romantic. Sometimes it starts ugly, strategic, self-serving, but if two people are brave enough to stay when the crisis ends, it becomes something else. One night, months later, Sophie crawled into our bed again, not because of a nightmare, just because. She looked at her baby brother sleeping in the bassinet and whispered, "Remember when this was just us 3? I nodded, "And now it's 4. She smiled sleepily. "Good thing you said yes, Daddy." Marissa squeezed my hand in the dark. "Good thing I did, because here's the truth no one talks about. Love doesn't always start pure. Sometimes it starts practical. Sometimes it starts desperate. Sometimes it starts with a knock on the door and an impossible deadline. But if you choose it after the deadline passes, if you stay when you're no longer required to, if you build when no one is watching, that's when it becomes real. Some promises are rushed, some are strategic, but the ones that last, they're the ones you keep choosing, and we kept choosing every day. And that changed everything.